and welcome. My name is Preeta Hariram and I'm your host today. It's an early start for many of you from this side of the world. However, for those of you joining us from the other side, mostly from the southern hemisphere, it's a bit more of a nicer timing. But needless, wherever you are, thank you all for taking the time to joining this very interesting session we have lined up for you. Because today we are going to be talking about water as a leverage. It's a practical solution bringing systemic change to the most urgent and pressing matter and crisis of our world today, water. We're all water experts, so I'm going to bear you the pain and also not tell you what you already know. However, today is about treading new ground and getting down to business as to how water as a leverage is a catalyst sparking a paradigm shift all over the world. And then this leads us onto our final focal point of global scalability. How, when, and what capacity can you get to get involved? The answer is you should have got involved yesterday, but don't worry, in the next 30 minutes, you will know further on how to get involved so that we can address this water crisis going forward. Let's remind ourselves what water as a leverage actually is in a nutshell, and its global current activity.
Pani.
Ini. Air.
Banyu.
Oh, pani khabo.
Tula.
Tentang beraninya.
Pengungkit itu adalah alat untuk menjugil.
Ini ininya nih, di sini beban. Nah, nanti ini diungkit ke sini buat naikin. Udah sih, Mas.
The kind of issues that dominate Chennai are all typified by water. Like either there's too much of it or too little of it. We face recurrent floods, recurrent droughts.
Semarang, as a coastal city, is suffering from tidal flood and land subsidence. So people here tend to think that water is actually their enemy rather than their friends.
ময়নদী খুলনা শহরের একটা প্রাণকেন্দ্র এবং জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনজনিত কারণেই যেই প্রবলেমগুলো আমরা ফেস করি সেটা হলো জলাবদ্ধতা, অতিবৃষ্টি, ঝড় এবং স্যালাইনিটি যে বৃদ্ধি পাচ্ছে এখানে, যার কারণে আমার ফসল ঠিকমতো জন্মাচ্ছে না। পানি যেটা ওয়েস্ট ওয়াটার যেটা নদীতে ফেলে এবং নদী ক্রমাগত এটা নষ্ট করছে। এই ওয়াটার অ্যাজ লেভারেজের এই প্রোগ্রামের আওতায় আমরা নদীটাকে প্রবাহিত করতে পারি, পরিষ্কার রাখতে পারি, রিজার্ভার হিসাবে এখানে কাজ করতে পারি এবং বায়োডাইভার্সিটি এখানে উন্নত করতে পারি।
Water as leverage really changed the perspective of seeing water and treat water. For example, one of the WAL concept is resilient kampung. By making this place free from tidal flood and land subsidence, we can provide a good livelihood for the people here. So they can live here, they can work here, they can play here, and also this could be a role model for any other similar coastal places around the world.
As a program, Water as Leverage made sure that water was not looked upon as a problem issue. It was looked upon as an opportunity. It was looked upon as a connector. One of the things that the program attempts to do is to capture water effectively. One of the sites is a temple tank. There are 54 major temple tanks in the city of Chennai. Historically, these tanks serve the purpose of water recharge. Water as leverage very innovatively attempts to restore this and make sure that the water harvesting part of it is maximized so that water is available on a sustained basis to everyone. Water as leverage project also triggered a more holistic approach in handling water. It looks at humans as responsible entities that can play a very pivotal role in conserving a very limited resource for future. So in a sense it was completely innovative, something that the city had not witnessed before.
প্রোগ্রাম বটম আপ অ্যাপ্রোচ একদম রুট লেভেল থেকে যারা ইউজার, যারা এই পানি ব্যবহারকারী, যারা জলাবদ্ধতার শিকার এবং একদম রুট লেভেলের কৃষক পর্যন্ত, কৃষক, রিক্সাওয়ালা সবাই এখানে এনগেজ ছিল। সমঝোতা এর মাধ্যমেই আমরা এটা তৈরি করতে সক্ষম হব। আমি একটি সবুজ এবং বাসযোগ্য খুলনার স্বপ্ন দেখি, যেখানে প্রাকৃতিকভাবে সব কিছু গড়ে উঠবে এবং লবণমুক্ত পানি যদি আমরা ব্যবহার করতে পারি এবং বায়োডাইভার্সিটি এখানে উন্নত করতে পারি, এটা একটা সাস্টেনেবল সিটি হিসেবে গড়ে উঠবে ভবিষ্যতে।
My dream is that the people of Semarang will love the water, that every place near the water, it can be a beautiful place, it's not an abandoned place, and all the people of Semarang will consider water as friends.
I dream of a Chennai where the city does not fear water, where water is celebrated and look at it as a resource that you really can conserve for future in an extremely inclusive manner.
What an inspirational video. And today here in the studio, we have Mr. Henk Ovink and Miss Cynthia von Elk. Henk, Cynthia, welcome.
Thanks, Prita.
So Henk, please tell us, where did water as a leverage begin?
Water as leverage begins at the understanding that everything we currently do, almost everything, is leading to more climate change and also more vulnerability. So to escape that lock-in, we have to create time and space to invest in each other, build trust and capacity, and develop solutions that really leapfrog us out of this lock-in situation. And water, as a connector, because it's about social issues, economic, environmental, climate, and cultural issues, has that capacity. So water brings us together, provokes solutions and partnerships that can deal with those future challenges and be replicated and scaled. So focusing on 3 cities in Asia, this is where we started.
Fantastic, Henk, but quite complex it also sounds. So if you were to explain what water as a leverage is in a text message, what would be the game-changing words to really draw people in?
Well, more than water as leverage, the springboard for sustainable action, climate action, I don't know. The complexity of the future challenges is the opportunity. Embracing that complexity and not ignoring it, like we currently do, is our way forward. So perhaps the text would be something like, water as leverage, your opportunity for inclusive and sustainable climate action.
I think that's fantastic. That's really, really good. I think it could also be water as a leverage, your opportunity is now. Because I said to our viewers today that they should have joined us yesterday. So they better get on.
They better
track.
get on. Yes,
absolutely.
very good. Thanks,
Thank
Britta.
you very much,
Yeah.
Henk. Cynthia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, as a documentary photographer, you've seen water as a leverage implementation through a different lens. So, as an outsider to these contexts, what stood out for you?
Well, what really stood out for me is to see how, from the very beginning, local communities were participating in the whole process. They were given a stage and a voice. They were invited to the workshops, and they would be right there with their local government officials, with the designers, the urban planners, and they could in detail explain what their situation was in their neighborhoods, the problems that they were dealing with. And then after that, the design teams would go on site visits to the communities and talk to the residents. Sort of town hall style meetings would be organized where design teams and the local people would talk, and again, they would be given the opportunity to voice their concerns. So through this approach, I think it's fantastic how the local stakeholders could both interact so directly with officials and the teams, so they would be understanding that their voices were heard and taken into account.
Wow, what a great observation. A lot of opportunities there. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you very much. So theoretically, water as a leverage ticks all the boxes. But how has it held up in reality, and what adaptations have been made along the way in its journey to date? Let's take a brief recap of water as a leverage in Chennai before talking with the people who will also be joining us later on.
The kind of issues that dominate Chennai are all typified by water. Either there's too much of it or too little of it. But despite that, it's also something that can be seen as an entity that can function as a leverage. Water becomes an opportunity that can trigger livelihoods, trigger big industries, trigger prosperity. It becomes a connector. It becomes something that people can actually contribute to, people can take action and make sure a water secure city is enabled.
I am going to have a brief chat to Dr. Jayshree Venkatesan, co-founder of Care Earth Trust and also member of Tamil Nadu State Wildlife Board. This was a pre-recorded conversation, so let's take a look. Vanakkam, Dr. Jayshree. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Likewise, Vanakkam.
Would like to know from you, how did water as a leverage shift the thinking to the problems related to water initiatives in Chennai? And in your opinion, what were the key impacts of this? Please.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. From a city that celebrated monsoons, Chennai since 2005 descended into a city that was scared of monsoons and scared of rains. People were not looking forward to rains anymore in the city, which is otherwise rather charismatic and is along the coast of Bay of Bengal. The paranoia that set in because of the unseasonal rains or the intense rains that typified 2015 and the floods that happened was followed by a series of drought years. So we were switching from a point of abundance of water or excess of water and water-related problems to no water. And unfortunately, we got a lot of global attention for the wrong reasons, for being a city that was very soon meeting zero water conditions. Now, Chennai city has always managed water as something that is in a demand kind of a scenario. So whatever be the initiative was focused on providing additional water to the citizens and their ever-growing demand. And come what may, this water had to be provided at least during the lean months. And for this, we had come up with some of the initiatives that the state came up with are rather bizarre, like ferrying water using trains, ferrying water from places as far as 80 kilometers away, ferrying water by extracting water from groundwater wells in farmers' fields, rendering the entire landscape dry. So when water as leverage came in, this focus very beautifully got shifted to water as being a resource which is limited, but a resource that can be harnessed and used with some kind of prudence for future benefits. That was the biggest shift that water as leverage brought in to the city of Chennai and its citizens.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's interesting to note the approach adopted in Chennai, and many lessons learned have now been adopted for same approach here in Rotterdam. But more about that and details a bit later. And Cynthia, you've captured many elements of what was just said and outlined. What really caught your photographer's eye?
Well, I witnessed in 2019 in July, I was in Chennai, and there I witnessed the drought that was going on at that time, where monsoons had failed, and the people who rely on hand pumps in their neighborhoods, there was no water coming out of the pump because the groundwater level had receded so far down that no water could be pumped up. So water had to be trucked in from outside of the city, and it would be delivered to these neighborhoods every other day at times not known in advance. So you'd have to stick around as a resident because if you leave for an hour, you might miss the truck and then you'd be without water for the next few days. So as soon as the truck arrives, all these women pour out of their houses carrying their empty water pots and then flock to the water truck, and it get very crowded there. You had to elbow your way through, really, and so arguments would occur and sometimes small fights. So these were scenes as I was going along Chennai that I would see in many neighborhoods. So that caught my professional eye, but also it opened my eyes because I realized that really what I was witnessing was a real, quite literally, a struggle, a fight for water, over water. So it was a true eye-opener to me.
Wow, wonderful. And perhaps if you were there maybe about a year before that, it was the other way in Chennai.
Yes.
Yes. Really tough over there. In such projects, the role of multilateral development banks is key. I also had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Sumila Gilyani from the World Bank, program leader for sustainable development in India, who, despite not being able to join us today, it was good to catch up with her. So let's please take a look.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me for this conversation. It's a real pleasure to join you. We've been working with the Water as Leverage team. We've met a few times and seen the work they're doing. And it is really an exciting partnership for us to have with the Water as Leverage team of the Netherlands. Let me step back for a bit. For the World Bank, the issue of sustainable and resilient urbanization is a very important one and a key area of focus. If in our view, climate change and the urban transition that's happening in the world are pretty much some of the most important development challenges of our time, at least for the first part of this century. And what we do in the first part of this century will lay the foundations of what happens after. So Water as Leverage also identifies a similar area of focus, which is resilient cities and the role of water in resilient cities. And I think there is a very important connection there. So let's take the case of India, since you asked about that. So India's urban transition is going to be unprecedented in human history in its speed and scale. In fact, it will surpass the speed and scale of the urban transition that has happened in China. Conservative estimates put it at different places, but one of the estimates says that at least 270 million additional people will be urban residents between 2020 and 2040. So that means you're adding little more than 1 million people a month. And the reason that's a little bit of concern is because Indian cities aren't doing very well when it comes to the basics like delivery of basic services like water, for example, or sanitation. And at the same time, many of these cities, such as Chennai, again, a city that you mentioned, have a combination of droughts at certain times and floods at other times. So not only do they not have 24/7 water in almost any city in India, many of them are plagued by floods, and therefore you have a very difficult situation with water. So it's really important to tackle that particular issue. Now, Water as Leverage comes in with a very interesting angle into this. And it says, let's figure out how we can work with multiple stakeholders. I really like that particular aspect of Water as Leverage. It identifies government stakeholders, NGOs, communities, international experts, local experts, and brings them together to define the problem and to create tailored solutions. So that's a first aspect that I like very much. So a second piece of the approach that Water as Leverage takes that I find very interesting is how it connects small or medium-sized projects and their detailed design to a larger strategy. So in the case of Chennai, I was very intrigued to see, for example, that they have developed small pilot projects, say around a tank, a single tank in a temple, and then say, if we get this right here, we can do this for 1,000 tanks in Chennai and come up with a system solution. Similarly, they work on the design of rehabilitating the flows in one canal, and then they want to go to city scale. So I really like that. So essentially, in summary, they have a multi-stakeholder approach, and they go from the micro to a larger systems impact. Of course, the key challenge that a program like Water as Leverage faces is, okay, so how do you finance this whole thing from the pilots to the systems approach? And I guess this is where multilateral development banks, such as the World Bank, can step in. So how is it that an agency like the World Bank and Water as Leverage could partner? The way it works for MDBs, including the World Bank, is that we work with the project proposals and ideas presented by governments, right? So we work very closely with them in screening the proposals, modifying them, but we start with what they propose to us. So I think a key step would be for Water as Leverage to get enough local buy-in from the state and the city government to have them included in their investment proposals and figure out whether they can use either their own financing to develop some pilots or present it as a part of the package of investments to multilateral development banks. So if it's included there, then we can start with it and start building it out. Now, a second issue that an MDB, at least like the World Bank, would look at is this solution scalable? Can it be taken to scale? And secondly, does it contribute to the development of a system and an approach that can outlast the 5-year rough financing that a single World Bank program would bring? So essentially, those would be the criteria that we would use. And one of the things we could try and do, or Water as Leverage could try and do, is to have the government invite them to join conversations with financiers such as the World Bank.
Thank you so much for your time and really appreciate you speaking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to join you, and thank you for inviting me.
So Henk,
Prita,
in your opinion, just after listening to what Sumilia also said, how should financiers incorporate water as a leverage in their investment planning going forward?
I think two ways are of critical importance. Water as Leverage showed that investing in the process, really upfront, from the understanding of the problem, all the way to creating an enabling environment, building capacity institutionally and with the communities, is an investment opportunity in itself. Yeah, you could say you need $1 million to spend billions wisely, but we often lack the millions to spend those billions in the best way possible. So I think that is one. The second is really about the pipeline. We need better pipelines. What's on the shelf makes us more vulnerable is in increasing climate change. So provoking that on-the-shelf stack, that pipeline of outdated proposals with the newer ones is what Water as Leverage can bring. So it's the process to invest in and the replication and bringing it to scale that these financial partners, being the multilaterals, can really bring to the table.
Well, I can't agree more. As you know, Henk, I come from that same sector and one who's endorsed also water as a leverage, but definitely it does provide an opportunity for investors to definitely step in at a very early stage as well.
Yeah.
Because we look for bankable solutions, and this is what programs like this can provide. So thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Our next guest is Thiru Harminder Singh, the Indian Administrative Services, who is the Commissioner of Sugar and Managing Director of Tamil Nadu Sugar Corporation Limited. He also formerly was the Additional Chief Secretary of the government's Municipal Administration and Water Supply. Vanakkam, Mr. Singh. It is very nice to have you here with us today. We had the opportunity to meet each other in Singapore, so it's a pleasure to have you here again today. Going forward, in your opinion, is water as a leverage a way of developing, planning to make Chennai a more water-secure city? What do you think?
Yeah, Vanakkam, and thank you very much for inviting me for this engagement. In fact, Henk was telling that though I'm not holding the same portfolio now, but because of long association we had with each other, maybe over 2 years, where we met in Chennai, we met in Singapore, and we continue to have a large number of interactions. He requested that it would be better if you can share your experience. So I thank Henk once again for providing this opportunity. And as I have already mentioned, we had over 2 years engagement with this institution, and Chennai, as you know, has been facing both floods and droughts over many years. And water has been a very challenging issue for us. And city has done a lot to mitigate from its vulnerability to water and to make it more water secure. WAL has been adopting a multi-department, or maybe we can say that multi-country expertise was brought to Chennai, and it was really a good experience sharing, where we can learn from other countries how they have handled similar situation, especially Netherlands, which have been pioneer in this field. And we were really very much benefited by the experience which was brought from other countries. Not only that, WAL was also using the local expertise, the stakeholders experience, their views. So it was a mixture of international expertise, local stakeholders' views, their opinion, and the utilization of nature-based systems. All these things really helped us in shaping up the projects and making the Chennai water secure system a holistic concept.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. Henk, to you. Yeah. After hearing the very insightful practical knowledge from Chennai, what do you see as the future for water as a leverage in Chennai going forward?
Well, I see, of course, a great future for water as leverage in Chennai moving forward. And also, as Mr. Singh explained, we did not start from scratch. Chennai had water, the scarcity, the floods, the quality, front and center of the agenda. But the partnership we helped to bring, as well as the on-the-ground and off-the-ground solutions that really stem from the culture of the communities and strengthen that capacity, I think really helps in that ownership, moving water as leverage forward at all levels. That is government, but definitely also businesses, investors, communities, NGOs, schools, and individuals. And I think that longer thread of in continuity of ownership is of critical importance, next to delivering. If we can't show as a collective, as a water as leverage collective, that we can deliver on the promise we put on the table, we of course fail. And then Chennai is not the only place where we see that happen. But I'm very optimistic. We're working very hard with all local stakeholders and our international partners to deliver and then scale and replicate these ideas, these projects, but definitely also the approach of partnership, of building capacity, institutional and individual forward. So I think we need a long breath, continuity, consistency and commitment to make sure that we can deliver and replicate these ideas forward.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Singh. We really appreciate the time you've taken to speak with us today.
Really nice to see all of you again. Maybe we will have more opportunity to see each other in future once the COVID-19 settles down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So I would like to thank both Mr. Singh and our speakers from India who joined us remotely. But someone who is also all too familiar with water as a leverage, especially on its adaptations, is Ms. Eva Pfanes, who, whilst can't be with us here today, we managed to catch up with her in Rotterdam. So let's take a brief glimpse of what she's been up to these days.
We are here in the International Architecture Biennial Rotterdam, where the idea of leverage was born. Because of climate change, our societies have to go through a number of changes. There will be changes in the way we use resources, like water and energy, and now the idea of leverage is how can we use these changes and the investments that come with it as a leverage for societal gains and benefits in the neighborhoods we live in. The lessons learned from Chennai are that we have to actively work with citizens in neighborhoods and tap into their local knowledge and develop projects with them instead of for them. The second lesson is that we have to use the surfaces and the city that we already have and build further on it and improve it and repair it together with nature that we bring in. We're hoping that we can connect in the near future the different stakeholders, the inhabitants, the housing corporations, the energy service companies, and the city government and the government to work on an integrated solution together that takes into account all the social benefits and the environmental benefits that can be reaped with a local solution. I think that this framework and the method of working that we developed using water and energy as a leverage, we can learn from this process, and in the process of learning we can apply it to other neighborhoods, other cities, and on a global level.
Henk, that
Britta.
recording was at the International Architecture Biennial, something that you are extremely familiar with.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on the role of culture to create more sustainable infrastructure in the case of a neighborhood, let's say?
Yeah, what the background of the International Architecture Biennale Rotterdam is to create that free space, not for free, but to create space to invest in each other, build trust and capacity to really look at those very complex, wicked problems we face. So it's not a space to celebrate, but it's really to work hard. But because these problems are so complex, you have to really ground them in the culture of the place, in the culture of a neighborhood, but also in the culture of the environment. Systemic change comes from understanding the systems. And this is where a cultural approach, a by design approach really helps, but only if there is time and space to really take that investment. This is what Water as Leverage did and is still continue to do in Asia. We're bringing it to Africa and Latin America, even to the Netherlands. And this is also what the International Architecture Biennale Rotterdam is trying to do in embracing that approach.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think you used the right word here, culture.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to take it to different parts of the world, you really need to understand one's culture to be able to build perspectives, and in this case, infrastructure that's suitable for that. So it's really nice that there is a safe place to be able to create and for people to come together at whatever level to address these cultural differences and look forward for water security. Thank you. Thank you very much, Henk. So it's a pleasure to see global scale of water as a leverage. As Henk earlier mentioned, currently we have Vietnam that's also endorsing this particular program and approach. There are scale-ups and opportunities in Africa, in South America, as Henk also just earlier mentioned. There's some things happening in Shenzhen, China, but also here in Europe, not only in the Netherlands, but in the wider part of the region. So water as leverage is leading the way for us to think in a different way, to approach the global crisis in water. But how and when should you get involved? Henk, when do you think people should get involved, and how can they get involved?
You said it yesterday at the beginning, so I'm just going to repeat that. And at the same time, I think everywhere around the world, water as leverage there's no copyright to the concept. Everybody can start by really looking holistically in a very integrated, comprehensive way at these complex challenges, to really work inclusively at every step of the way, leaving no one behind, creating the opportunity to provoke the vested interest, the systemic lock-ins we face, to help develop those solutions that really make change possible. That can come at any scale. But do know that we from the Netherlands are your partner in helping to provoke these opportunities and build capacity, as well as those solutions, and bring them forward. But also understand that there is no one way, as you said. It's cultural. It has to come from the places and the systems where we face those wicked problems, those challenges, that we have to develop this. So start everywhere, in any place. But you can also look at watersleverage.org and find us there, or give us a call. We're happy to jump to the opportunity and see what we can do together, or build connections and partnerships in starting this better pipeline for this so much needed better world.
Thank you very much, Henk. If people were not inspired earlier from the various speakers, I think that last statement that you made is incredibly inspiring. I think the opportunity for water as a leverage going forward has immense abilities and opportunities for us to actually address this crisis today. So thank you very much, Henk. Thank you.
Thanks, Britta.
Thank you. So if you're wondering how to get in touch with water as a leverage, when you should get in touch, I think that was already answered. Be sure to keep up to date. The details are there on your screen as well, as you can see. But needless, it has been such a pleasure hosting you. My name is Preeta Hariram, and goodbye. Thank you.